We're 4 minutes late.
This is early for me, John. This is
8:04. We're 4 minutes late. Hello, everybody. Hi, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes?
everybody's.
Oh, everyone's going to be late. All right. So I teach at an art school. And in art school, we have the art school 5 minutes. Right? So are you suggesting that I give an art school 5 minutes here? Okay.
Art school might be more of an art school.
Like, I'm not against you about it. Somewhere, I do. I think let's slowly get started. And we'll do, before we start our conversation, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here and why we're here and all of those things and lessons learned. Not yet. So anyways, my name is John Freyer, and I'm an associate professor of cross-disciplinary media in the Department of Photography and Film at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. So that's a lot of words put together. And this is a program that's been literally years in the making. So I was talking to the Society of Fellows and Heyman Center for the Humanities in 2019 when about potentially doing something with a variety of my projects. And Eileen, who's here, Eileen Galuli, recommended that I reach out to Leslie Jamison. And because she was teaching here, wouldn't it be great for some sort of thing to happen where you and Leslie have an opportunity to have a conversation? So this is that conversation. It has been interrupted by a pandemic. And this event actually was almost interrupted by the same pandemic. You'll notice that I am wearing a mask because I am CDC safe from COVID, but I don't want to shake any hands or anything like that. So I will maintain my distance. So one of the things that inspired this project or this conference is that during the pandemic, a lot of it, could I announce that I am a person in recovery? So my name is John. I am a person in recovery, and that's right. So some people are familiar with the call and response. And what that means to me is that I haven't had a drink or a drug that hasn't been prescribed to me and used as prescribed since May 21st, 2013. And it means that I am in a community of recovery. It means that I am in service to not just the recovery community, but to the community of people who use drugs. It means I'm connected to harm reduction strategies. It means that, I live my life in a way that helps me continue to do the things that are important to me. So this program came out of these conversations I was having with Columbia and Leslie. And during the pandemic, actually, we couldn't do this conference in fall of 2020. And I think in the fall of 2020, perhaps, I joined a recovery meeting that had a lot of people that are in this conference in it. And for the first time in my recovery experience, so I live in Richmond, Virginia. I have a connection to the broad recovery community, this very diverse recovery community in Richmond. But the connection to other artists and writers in recovery, I had some of that in Richmond. But the internet and Zoom really expanded that network. So a very important part of my recovery journey now and my recovery experience is being connected to people around the country and around the globe that are in recovery. And it's been a really amazing experience to have people that are in the creative field that are dealing with recovery in a public space. Yeah.
Well, I would just add to that sort of origins narrative for this conference that I actually feel grateful in certain ways. I'm not celebrating the existence of the pandemic that delayed this, but a lot has happened in the 3 years between when this was supposed to happen and when it is happening.
Yes.
That make this conversation even richer for me. So part of it is that we've had a chance to actually really deeply engage with each other's practices and the relationship that each of us have as artists to recovery. We've been able to be part of a recovery community, this pandemic meeting that you've talked about, which sort of has become this beautiful organism and force and expanding and changing, but to be part of that community together. You brought me down to Richmond in the spring. You hosted me and my daughter, who is herself a force of nature, in your backyard. I now feel like when we sit down in these two chairs, we're both touching something that is much bigger than either one of us, but we also bring a lot of shared history to the table that makes it that much more meaningful to be here.
Yes, and this conference and looking at the schedule for tomorrow, it's a very busy schedule. There's a lot of amazing people that we're going to be hearing from and talking to, and really that couldn't have happened without the pandemic. I mean, in terms of so is that the art school 5 minutes? I think that is. All right. So the thing that we're doing here is we are collectively, you are going to participate. I've never done this like with this many people in New York City. I'm not sure if you guys are joiners or not, but I think you'll be. It's fine. So this is a project that's called Free Ice Water. And I think what I'm going to do is tell the origins of it and tell a little bit about this turning point. And then I'm going to ask you, and when we're done with that, we'll show people how to do the thing we're going to do. And then y'all will do it. All right. So these mason jars, these beautiful ball mason jars, in 2013, they were on sale at Target. And in early sobriety, for me, or early recovery, however we want to define it, I was pretty manic. And I bought all the jars. All of them. Like if you went to Target on a Thursday, I bought them all. And if I went to another Target, I bought them. So, and now they're actually worth a lot of money. So there's a 6-pack of jars that I haven't broken into. They're worth like $100. People love these particular jars. So when you take one of these home, it's accrued value. So needless to say, early sobriety is not a time to make art. I mean, it is a time to like do a lot of things, but it wasn't really a time of organization. It was a time of kind of chaos that I'll dig into deeper. But eventually these jars became a vehicle to share with people what I had learned in my recovery experience. And I do come from 12-step recovery, so I come from a place where people sit in meetings, people talk in meetings, people don't crosstalk, all kinds of things. And that was really new to me. And because I was a person that would just talk and talk and talk and talk, and people said, shut up. Maybe you could listen. Maybe if you listened, it would get better. And eventually, about 2 years into my recovery, I had an opportunity to do an event with Rams in Recovery, which is a collegiate recovery program at VCU, where they were having the first meeting of collegiate recovery programs in Virginia at my host institution. and Tom, who's out here somewhere, invited me to do something. And we came up with this idea of, I have all these jars. I have a lot of them. Basically, this project is about sharing with you the thing that I learned in recovery, which was how to listen. So the prompt for this, when you all divide into two, is to think about a turning point in your life. And in recovery circles, a lot of people can point to a particular day, right? So if I just said May 31st, 2013, so that's 10 odd years, 10 and change years ago. And I can look at that date and say, that's a particular turning point that really changed the direction of my life. You know, I was not heading anywhere fast, and I wasn't heading here, right? So part of the prompt is also for y'all is, can you identify a turning point in your life? A person that you met, a book that you read, an experience that you had, something that someone said to you that made you go left instead of right, or right instead of left. I don't want to pull left, right, I'm saying all the time. And in many ways, like, what makes us the kind of people that would want to spend our Thursday night in a large metropolitan area talking about recovery and interested in recovery? So who was that, or what was that turning point for you? In my case, Leslie asked me, just as we were walking on, do you tell the same story every time?
I think I asked, do you tell a different story every time?
Oh, yeah.
It's the same question, but phrased a different way. Yeah.
And the answer is yes. It's because actually, if you're thinking, when I think of turning points, I have a lot. You know, I'm a person in recovery. I am a person that also has mental health challenges that I treat with medication. You know, and I'm a person who has stood on a bridge. Mm-hmm. And that's a significant turning point for me. And that was in sobriety. And I've certainly never shared that in a space. But part of why I'm here is because in my recovery program, so if I look at May 21st as 2013 as a date that I stopped consuming alcohol, it wasn't until maybe August of 2013 that I started taking the medication that was required for me to get well. Mm. And I had a sponsor at the time who basically said to me, you're a liar because you have this medication that you're not taking. So you're lying to your doctor, you're lying to your wife, you're lying to everybody. And I can't work with people who constantly lie. And he basically said, so you're going to, and I don't recommend this, don't do this. It's not recommended, but he was like, you're going to go inside and get that medication and you're going to take it in front of me. Or you're going to go inside and get your phone and call your doctor and say that you're not going to take the medicine. Doesn't matter. You just have to be honest about what you're doing.
Okay.
So that's a turning point for me. So May 21st, this is also something like I'm happy to share about recovery and my recovery journey specific to alcohol and May 21st. I don't know the exact date that Michael came to my house sometime in August. And I was not getting well in those 90 days up until that happened. And I got better slowly but surely when I was taking care of my recovery, in recovery from all of the things that impact me. So that is a turning point in my life. There's a few in there, but getting sober, getting the right medication, getting through the depression and getting to a place where I knew that it would get better. And I have to tell you that my life looks nothing like what I anticipated. Everything I do is interrelated with service and other people, and connection and interaction and all of these things that the person who wouldn't stop talking did not get to benefit from. So Leslie, is this a how's that? Or do you have can you talk about a turning point?
I sure can, John. And I might also ask, since I don't have my own phone or watch, if you would be my spiritual timekeeper, because I know you're not going to, whatever,
Yes, so
pull out the cane if I go over it, but I just want to keep myself.
So we are about halfway through because we did give the art school 10 minutes.
Great. Okay.
Right.
All right. So just, give me a sign if you need me to stop. But, I love so much of what you said. I love this practice. We've talked about, you've told me stories about doing this and the jars. I didn't know about the early Target binge, which is like the perfect beginning to the material story of these ball jars. But I love how relational it is. I love how faithful it is to listening as a posture that just is nearly infinite in its gifts and is renewable at every moment. And for me, listening has been one of the most crucial ways in which recovery has become central to my own artistic practice. Not all of the writing I do is about recovery, although some of it is, but that sense of listening to experience, listening to other people's experiences, listening in new ways to my own experience in ways that allow me to sort of like slough off the snakeskins of the old, familiar, comfortable, well-trodden narratives of my own experience. Like all of these are forms of listening that feel incredibly indebted to my own life and recovery community. So I love that listening is like at the core of this act for you. And I love also the ways in which you sort of demonstrated that in talking about one turning point, you almost inevitably are talking about a few, because I think one of the things about turning points is they like deliver you to the next one and you could never have gotten there without them. So they start to form this chain. When I was thinking about what I might talk about here, some of the first turning points that came to mind were the kind of capital letter life event turning points, which certainly have been huge for me. My own last drink, which was in December of 2010, was right up there. My divorce was right there. The birth of my child was right there. But I ended up thinking that maybe what I would talk about today was a turning point that preceded all of those, that happened when I was a bit younger and in my early 20s. But in a way, it laid the groundwork for all the selves that would make those choices later on. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about leaving New York. I moved to New York when I was 22 years old for the first time. And I came here like so many people do, with different reasons and different stories and different backstories. I came here because I had a vision of the kind of life that I thought like one could live in New York, or that I thought I would live in New York. And it was it was like that I would have a job and that I would have a nice apartment and that I would kind of do the things like that the externals of my life would look a certain way, that they would look kind of like that I was a person who had like important places to be and maybe like meetings where people was excited. I don't know. It was cinematic, but I didn't know what movie it was from. What?
How do you feel about meetings now?
Yeah, meetings conjures a different thing to me. It's funny because I have a partner who does go to meetings, like work meetings, and it's still like almost anthropological for me. I do occasionally go to meetings for my own job, but it still has a bit of a feeling of like, oh, I'm like, are there snacks there? It's always my first question. So I came here. I moved in with one of my very best friends in the world, and that friend was like the one good thing about my life in New York. And nothing else was really working. I hated the jobs that I had. I worked as a personal assistant for, I don't know. I don't think that many people are terrible people. Like, it's kind of antithetical to my way of being in life philosophy, but I might think that she was a terrible person. She made me cry almost every day, and she made her entire little industry of domestic and administrative workers cry on a daily basis. It was a really dark brownstone. And that I say I hated that job. I hated it. Then I quit that job, and I hated the temp job I had afterwards, which I cried less frequently at, but was sort of more numb at. It was like a windowless cubicle. I ran security searches on high asset clients for a very large bank. Nothing could be further from like everything that means anything to me in the world. And I think I also really came to feel that I wanted my life to be about making things and putting things into the world, and that the life I was, I don't know, being drawn towards living here or in that moment in my life was a life that was so much about consumption, was about making money so you could spend it, was about drinking so I wouldn't have to feel, it felt like the only things that I could reach for were the things that I was taking in rather than the things I was putting out. So I was unhappy and decided in a way that I was a real rule follower, and I was a real achiever, and I was somebody who felt that I always had to do what people wanted me to do. I always had to do what I was expected to do. If I was on a path, I had to follow it. And the decision that I ended up making, which was to quit my job, break my lease, move across the country. I moved in with my grandmother. All of those were not familiar or comfortable choices for me to like leave behind the life that was legible to other people, to be sort of like young and trying to make it in the city.
Yeah, there was a narrative.
There was a narrative there.
So what are you doing? I am doing this in New York.
And it's such a pattern for me. I actually had not thought about that, but it's such a pattern for me that I will sometimes choose a life where the narrative makes sense or is somehow appealing to me, even when it feels like hell to be living inside that narrative. So I guess what I want to say is this choice to move back to where I was from, which is Los Angeles, to move in with my grandmother, who was very, very dear to me. I had lived with her for chunks of my childhood as well. She taught me how to play bridge. She was a very kind and reserved woman and a very aggressive bridge player. I don't know if you play bridge. She was a very aggressive hitter.
I play euchre. Have you ever played euchre?
I have played euchre.
It's a very Midwest game.
Yeah. Yes. I haven't played it recently enough to be able to totally give you a disposition on the differences and similarities. But
people in Iowa City play euchre at George's.
Okay. I wish we could go there after this conference is done and play some euchre. Anyway, I love my grandmother, and what I guess what I want to say is like that decision to move back home, and I'll describe how it unfolded, but it changed my life in some ways that were related to what I was anticipating. Like it did in fact feel like an important moment in like choosing to become a writer. But it also changed my life in all these ways that I wasn't anticipating, which is part of kind of how big choices, I think, work on us. It's like we have some intention in mind for like, I will make this choice, I will jump off this cliff, I will do, and I will be rearranged in the following ways. And maybe some of those come to pass and maybe some of them don't. But then once you choose towards some kind of rearrangement, whatever that form of rearrangement is, you also are kind of like opening up space for the universe to act on you in all these ways that you might not be able to anticipate or understand. So I moved in with my grandmother. I got a couple of hourly jobs that were, frankly, totally awesome compared with all the work I was doing in New York. I worked as an innkeeper. I worked a 3 to 11 shifts at an inn. I basically made a lot of food. I did a lot of emotional labor with guests who brought all kinds of yearnings to my little kitchen, and I loved it. And I worked as a tutor. I mean, I was working a lot. I was doing a lot of caregiving for my grandmother, and I was also doing some writing, in part because I was like, if I've done all this, I better fucking write, So there was a way that once you sort of stake your life on it in some way, then you're inviting the rest of yourself to catch up. Yes. But the thing that I had not known and like could not have foreseen was, well, two things really. One was that my grandmother was dying, and nobody knew that or understood that in my family until it was really just upon us and happening. And I don't think if I had known that she was dying, I would have chosen to move back in with her. I don't think I had that bravery. I don't think I had that presence of mind or heart or spirit, because it was a lot. And I don't know if I would have been able to choose into that kind of difficult presence. But I was there, and it was a difficult presence that was upon me. And when I think back to it, I think, at the time, there was so much that felt overwhelming about it. It felt overwhelming to be going to the ER. It felt overwhelming to be finding her falling and wondering all the things that anybody who's done any kind of caregiving like that is thinking. Well, like, what does this person need? What am I doing wrong? That there's this kind of trouble upon us again, that this person is in danger or hurting or in peril. You're sort of struggling to catch up with like the needs of a person or a moment or a situation. All of that was like, it was hard, and it was hard to see her in pain, and it was hard to feel like I wasn't doing enough to help her.
And how old were you again?
I was 22.
Yeah, that's very young.
But looking back, it's like, first of all, that was she was at the end of her life. That was where she was, and there wasn't necessarily anything anybody should have been doing to interrupt that. And it also meant we got this time together. We got those months together. That never would have happened otherwise. And I think they did change the way I thought about intimacy and care and what it means to really be with a person, not just in moments of conversation or intellectual communion or, but also just really with them in moments of necessity and bodily need and desperation and fear and confusion.
And your feelings about it are informed by where you are now, as opposed to where you were then. Because probably when you were in it, it was incredibly challenging for a 22-year-old to be the primary caregiver for an aging grandparent.
Oh, absolutely. And so many of my feelings were not noble at all. They were selfish, and they were like, where is everybody else? Why am I here? And I think that that's another truth of kind of when we look back at these critical moments or these junctures, it's like the experience happens to you then, and it means a certain set of things to you then. And then it keeps happening to you in all the years that follow, because it keeps meaning different things to you and keeps sort of reappearing in different corners or furrows of your psyche. And I think the last thing I'll say really is that the other thing that was very true in that time, in a way that was related to what was happening with my grandmother, and just related to kind of an inevitable unfolding inside me was that was really the first place and time where it became clear to me that my drinking was, there was something unmanageable about it. And which is not to say that it hadn't ever been unmanageable before that. And it certainly got worse in the years that followed, but that was the first time that, I stole booze from my job. I not only drank alone a lot, but I realized that I preferred drinking alone to other kinds of drinking. Other kinds of drinking just felt like other people were getting in the way, or why did I want them judging me? It just felt like clearly logical, actually, that it was just like preferable to be in a room alone on like kind of a dirty futon just with the bottles. It's just simpler that way. And it was the first time that I, took bottles down the street to put them in somebody else's recycling, all that kind of stuff.
Did you know anybody in recovery at 22?
One of my best friends from college was in the process of getting sober at that time. And it was vaguely on my radar screen, but it felt very foreign and far away to me. And it was a couple of years later that the first time I can remember that I hung out with her and was sort of with her sobriety close up. And it was totally formative to me to see somebody who was like young and who I had seen really in the thick of getting drunk. I mean, we had gotten so drunk together, and to feel her life kind of vibrating in this new way was a revelation to me. So she was, she was in my mind, but felt far away in that moment.
Well, when you were talking about things happening again and again and again, like as an artist, the word iteration is really important to me. And when I'm making, so projects that I do are iterative and they build upon each other. So Free Ice Water, when it first started, was about me talking to someone else for an hour. And also Free Ice Water had 7 steps. You had to turn your phone off. There were all these different things. I mean, there was early sobriety, so I'm like, and then we'll do these things in 7 steps. And you have to do them all. And you have to turn your phone off. You have to put it to sleep. And then you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And every time I've done it since, it's become simpler and simpler and simpler. So this is a segue into the group participation part of these conversations. So what's important to me with this is that everybody came here either alone or with somebody. So if you came with somebody, find someone who came here alone. Don't talk to someone that you know. So find someone who you don't know, introduce yourself, because that's what we do here. And basically what you'll do is there's a set of mason jars over there. So talk about iterations. The original version of this is you would have one jar between the two of you. And then at the end, you would each share water from the same jar, which we'll never do again. So that part's out. And also the 7 steps and the handout and all that stuff, because really we're asking you to do a turning point, right? So we have this jar. And I think what we'll do is we will walk you all back to the jar station. So each pair will get one jar. And over there's lids. Don't put the lids on first, because I've learned that if you put the lids on the cold jar, they perspire, and then you can't put anything, you can't write on them. So just get a jar, and then we'll figure it out there. The other thing is, the prompt is to bring an object with you that could fit in one of these jars or in a closed fist of significance to you. If you don't have that, that's fine, because I have made tokens that you can put in the jar. So one of you will leave with a glass jar filled with these tokens that has your signature on it. And the other person will leave with whatever piece of this coin that has a jar in it. So if you want to leave the jar or the hole, whatever it might be, so that both of you leave with something. So pick up a jar, pick up a token, And so Leslie and I are going to complete this work. So you have an object that you, and so the other thing we've learned is that at the end of this thing, what we'll do, we won't drink from it. So these to me are all of these jars are filled with ice, and they're melting into water. And for me, in the early iterations of this project, I've had recordings on the table and done transcripts of people's conversations. And you know what? The best recording of the conversations for me is the melting ice. Like, it really is supposed to be a private one-to-one conversation that melts ice. And that's it. So you have something that you want to put in the jar? I'll give this to you, or you can put it there.
I have this little Queen of Hearts in honor of my grandmother and her loves for Ridge.
So I have a button that says "Needle Exchange Saves Lives," and this is classic harm reduction strategies that for me. In early recovery, I was really focused on recovery and people in recovery, and in the past 4 or 5 years, I'm really focused on everybody, and especially people who use drugs. And so one of the things that's out here that's part of this conference is we have the free Narcan bike, where we do distribution of naloxone and Narcan to reverse opioid overdoses. So I didn't understand free needle exchange in early sobriety, but free needle exchange, safe use, all of these things are important, and safe supply are really important things that I advocate for now, because I want people to live. So this is something that's important to me in terms of the direction that my service and practice is heading in now, in addition to loving and talking to wonderful people in recovery. All right, so we have now put that in this jar. And then why don't you sign and date this with that pen?
Do I put both of our names on it?
No, I'll sign my. Okay. I mean, you can't do my signature. I mean, actually, you probably could do my signature because it's just a big jar.
No, I don't want to. September 21st.
It's the 21st. It's the equinox.
Saturday.
Oh, that's Saturday? I don't know. It's an important day. Oh, you know what? We have a pretty close signature here. Artist, writer, or lawyer? All right, so follow us back. This is also the place that somebody might choose to slip out. Right? I know this is like the time, like, oh, perfect. There's a break in it, but definitely take advantage of this because it is really, yeah, it's great. Let's go.